I made an interactive gamified unit circle course that you can use in your classrooms to help your students understand the unit circle better and enjoy the process of mastering it. I made it because when I was in school, I found math class really boring and I would kind of zone out or just fall asleep. And even now as a math tutor, I sometimes see my students' eyes glaze over when I'm talking for too long at one time. I'm going to show you the structure of the course, and then I'm going to share how helpful it's been with my own students and how you can implement it to help with your students. So the course is split up into 10 different parts. Each one covers a small element of the unit circle and slowly introduces students to the concepts. Within each part, there's 3 elements. The most important part is the interactive panel. This is where students read through the lesson and then they have parts that they can interact with like this, like they have to click and drag to make the unit circle. Then they read the next part, etc., etc. The other part is the video walkthrough, which is me going through the lesson myself. Most of, like 99% of the lessons, the interactive panel is pretty intuitive and it's pretty obvious what you have to do next. But sometimes students were like a little bit confused when I was testing it with them. So I added in lots of stuff to fix that, but I also added in this video walkthrough just so there's very little chance that someone could be confused on like what part they're supposed to do next, how they're actually supposed to do it. The third part is practice questions. So at the moment, this is not supposed to replace the normal textbook and all the hundreds of practice questions that are in there. But the feedback from one of my students was that she's like, oh, this is great, but I don't really see how I could apply it to actual questions. So what I've done is turn the content from the interactive lessons into more textbook style questions. And for each one of those, there's an answer. That's a terribly drawn circle, but I mean, we can all relate to not being able to draw circles well. So every question has an answer, and also there's a video explanation to go along with that, with me talking through exactly how to do it and relating it back to what they covered in the interactive lesson. So now that you see what each chapter has within it, I want to explain what are the different pieces that I broke everything up into. So the first one's introduction to the unit circle. In this one, we're basically just getting students used to how the angles actually work, like they're measured from the x-axis and they go positive and negative, and giving them some practice with that. The next one is introducing how you actually calculate the side lengths, so using cos theta and sine theta. Also explains why we can use cos theta and sine theta, so it relates it back to SOHCAHTOA. Next one is introducing the whole concept of symmetry, how if you have an angle here, that also relates to the angle over here and here and here, and how the result of cos of 30 is going to be the same as cos of 330, stuff like that. The next lesson is just covering tan, because sine and cos are kind of similar, but tan is its own kind of thing, so it has its own little lesson just for tan. Next one is showing how we can make the exact value table by showing students where these values actually come from in the sort of like the exact value triangles. You basically build the table by exploring the exact value triangles and how they can occur. This next lesson is purely just how to memorize the exact value table. There's probably a few different methods, but I explained the one that I use, which is pretty fast. The next one is just about inverse functions. So most of these were like, okay, let's do sine of 150, let's do cos of 330, and same for all the tan ones. This is where we start introducing, okay, what if you don't know what theta is? So you just know that sine of theta is going to be a half, and what are the different possible results for theta then? The next one is the same thing, but it covers how you can have 30 degrees, but you can also add 360 degrees to that and get another angle that works, so 390 degrees. And then you can also add on to that. It explains the infinite amount of results that you can get. And then this is the first time where radians are introduced. I know that some textbooks cover radians from the very start. For me, I felt like I wanted to just introduce the concepts using degrees so that we're not learning too many things at once, because I found that it overwhelms students sometimes. And so this is where we introduce radians and the concept of a radian and where that comes from. And then we use radians to answer questions that come from the previous lessons. And then there's a bunch of practice questions so they can get used to that as well. And then the last lesson is just how do we convert between radians and degrees, and a nice little method that I've found helpful with students to remember, you know, are we going to times by pi on 180? Are we going to times by 180 on pi? And and how to go through that, and then some practice questions for that. Now, I felt proud and excited when I was putting this whole thing together and learning how to program it and stuff like that. But the real moment of truth came when I was going to test it with my students and find out if it was actually helpful or not, or if I just wasted 6 months of my life. Would they find it interesting, or would they just think it's another boring waste of time maths exercise? And most importantly, would it actually help them to learn the unit circle better and retain it for longer? So I tested it with my students and they loved it. They liked the little frog character, they liked the sounds and visuals, they liked how you only need to read one little bit at a time rather than massive paragraphs, and how you can get immediate feedback and see why what you did was wrong. Like, one of the most exciting things for me that came up as I was designing this and as I was testing it is if a student thinks about their answer and they type in their answer, let's say they think for this one it's going to be like negative 0.87, for example, they can see, oh, okay, like I think it should be 0.87 because that looks about right, but because I said negative, it's going to go this way. So then they can go, oh, right, it's going to be positive because that's going to go this way. And then finding the vertical length, maybe they default to go, oh, that's going to be a half, right? So I'm going to do like that. And then it goes up and they go, oh, okay, like I can straight away see why that's not right. As opposed to they write it in their book and then they check the answer and they just see it's wrong and they don't see why straight away. So then they can adjust it and go negative and then they'll get it right. And maybe they have the wrong one there. Maybe they think it's 0.71 instead, right? And then it goes too far and they can see why that's wrong as well. So that's been the most exciting part for me and also for the students, is getting that immediate feedback and actually being able to see straight away, like, what is happening maths wise and how does it relate to more kind of real life situations, and also what exactly is wrong about my answer. So how can you use this with your own students in your own classroom? Basically, I see it as mainly you can give it to students to supplement their homework, especially students who you feel like they're kind of not understanding it in class, and they can work on it at home where they might be in a better environment for them, or they don't have as much distractions and they can just like put their head down and do it with the information right there. And then in the actual classroom, I can see it being used a few different ways. I'd say the most straightforward one is you put it on your own device, your own computer, and you project it onto the whiteboard and you read through the lesson and interact with it as you go. When there are some parts that are more involved and more interactive, you can get a student volunteer up to use the mouse and the keyboard to work on things. For some parts where it's just like, oh, what is this angle? You can ask students to put their hand up or yell out their guesses for what the answer is going to be for that part. The other option would be to have each student get it up on their own device. Now, it won't work on most tablets at the moment, I'm pretty sure, but if they have a laptop, it'll work. And so you can get each student to have it up on their laptop. So as a teacher, you can wander around the class, make sure people are actually on task. Also, if students have a question about a particular part, they're like, oh, why does this mean that? And the lesson said this, why does it mean that? And you can give that extra clarification. And if multiple students are having the same kind of question, you can obviously stop the class and do one explanation on the board to kind of supplement the interactive lesson. And the final way you could use it is just as an extracurricular thing. So if you have those smart students who are super into it and want to get like a deeper understanding, you can set it to them and it'll give their brains a new way to see how the unit circle stuff actually corresponds to actual situations. So that pretty much covers everything. I wanted to just get this out into the world and see if it's useful for people and how I can improve it to make it better. So there's a feedback form on the website. If you have any feedback on what you thought of it or anything that you think would make it more helpful for teachers and students, then please fill in the form and let me know. And there's also just a general contact form on my website that you can use. Happy to chat about anything related to this stuff. And yeah, I have a bunch more interactive tools that I'm putting together, so feel free to stay tuned for them. I'll be releasing them over the coming weeks. So the link to the course and a link to my website is in the description below. Feel free to use it. I hope you find it useful.